Elias Marlowe was no stranger to defiance. His entire life had been a rebellion against the constraints of reality. Time fascinated him, not as a mere measure of moments, but as a force, a fabric of existence that could be unraveled, altered, conquered. As a physicist and inventor, Elias dedicated himself to the study of temporal mechanics, working in isolation for decades in a remote cabin hidden deep within the forest. There were whispers of his eccentricity, rumors of experiments that bordered on madness, but Elias cared for none of it. His life's work was the chronosphere, a device of gleaming brass, crystalline dials, and intricate gears that pulsed with an inner light. It was beautiful and terrible, a machine that bridged the impossible. Not content with observing time, Elias sought to master it, to step across centuries as one might cross a stream. He had sacrificed everything for this machine, his career, his colleagues, even his health. And tonight, as a storm churned the skies outside, the chronosphere was finally ready. The laboratory trembled as thunder boomed through the valley. Rain lashed against the windows, and the wind howled like a living thing. Elias adjusted the chronosphere's dials, his fingers trembling with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. He had run every calculation, tested every component. He was certain it would work. Still, as he strapped the device to his wrist, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered a warning. This wasn't just science. It was something more primal, something forbidden. He silenced the thought. Genius demanded risk. Taking a deep breath, Elias pressed the activation switch. The world dissolved into chaos. A kaleidoscope of light and sound engulfed him, a storm of impossible sensations that tugged at his very soul. He felt himself being pulled apart, scattered across the vastness of existence, and then silence. When he opened his eyes, Elias found himself standing in an alien landscape. The ground beneath his feet was smooth and gray, stretching endlessly in every direction. The air was cold, heavy, and lifeless. Above him, the sky churned with black clouds that seemed to writhe and pulse, as though alive. There was no sun, no stars, only an endless twilight. He had arrived in what he could only describe as a liminal space, a place between moments. This was the in-between, a realm beyond time where the threads of reality intersected. The chronosphere on his wrist pulsed faintly, its dials spinning in slow, erratic patterns. Elias took a hesitant step forward, his boots echoing unnaturally on the ground. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint hum of the chronosphere. Then a voice echoed through the void. "You shouldn't have come." Elias froze. The voice was deep and resonant, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. Slowly he turned, and his breath caught in his throat. A figure stood before him, emerging from the shadows like a wraith. It was tall and impossibly thin, draped in tattered robes that shimmered and flickered like smoke. Its face was obscured, a shifting mask of darkness that seemed to absorb the light around it. "Who are you?" Elias demanded, his voice trembling. "I am the Keeper," the figure replied, its voice a cold whisper that burrowed into his mind. "You trespass in the Shard of Forever." Elias felt a chill crawl down his spine. I didn't mean to intrude," he stammered. "I just wanted to see, to understand." The Keeper tilted its head, the motion unnatural and bird-like. "And what will you do with what you see? Will you heal the scars you create, or will you tear them wider?" Before Elias could respond, the Keeper raised a skeletal hand. The void around them shifted violently, transforming into a kaleidoscope of images. Moments from across time unfolded around him. The birth of stars, the rise and fall of civilizations, the faces of people he did not know but somehow felt he had always known. It was overwhelming, dazzling beauty interspersed with unspeakable tragedy. Then the images turned inward. Elias saw himself. At first the visions were comforting, a young boy laughing in the snow, an ambitious scientist working tirelessly in his cluttered lab. But the scenes grew darker. He saw himself wandering the in-between, his face gaunt and hollow, his eyes wide with terror. He watched as he screamed, his body twisting and convulsing as unseen forces pulled at him, tearing him apart and stitching him back together in an endless, agonizing loop. "No," Elias whispered, shaking his head. "That can't be me." "It is," the Keeper said. "It always has been. You cannot move through time without becoming a part of it. The threads you touch unravel, and in their place you remain, a fracture that can never be mended." Panic surged through Elias. He turned and ran, the oppressive gray expanse offering no escape. The Keeper's voice followed him, cold and mocking. "You are unmaking yourself, Elias Marlowe. Every step you take leaves a scar. Every moment you touch splinters further." Elias stumbled, falling to his knees. The chronosphere's dials spun wildly now, its hum rising to a frantic pitch. Desperation clawed at him as he adjusted the settings, attempting to return to the moment he had left. The machine flared to life, and he was ripped from the in-between. He landed in his laboratory with a jarring thud. The familiar surroundings should have been a comfort, but something was wrong. The air felt heavy, oppressive, and the room was bathed in an eerie red light. Then he noticed the blood. It was smeared across the floor in dark, viscous streaks, leading to the corner of the room. A low groan echoed from the shadows. Elias froze, his heart pounding. Slowly, he turned to see a figure hunched in the corner, its body twisted and contorted. It stepped into the dim light, and Elias felt his stomach drop. The creature was him, but not as he was. This version of himself was grotesque, its eyes hollow and lifeless, its skin stretched tight over its skeletal frame. Its movements were jerky and unnatural, like a marionette pulled by invisible strings. "You can't escape," it rasped, its voice a distorted echo of Elias's own. "You've already lost." Before Elias could react, the creature lunged at him. He activated the chronosphere in a blind panic, and the room dissolved once more. The leaps became more chaotic, more desperate. Each jump threw him into a fractured version of reality. In one, he stood in his lab, but it was decayed and overrun with strange, pulsing growths. In another, he wandered the ruins of a city, the air thick with ash and screams. The shadow of himself was always there, lurking, pursuing, growing more monstrous with each encounter. Elias's mind began to unravel. His memories fractured, slipping through his grasp like sand. He could no longer tell where or when he was. All he knew was fear, despair, and the relentless pursuit of the creature that bore his face. At last, he found himself back in the Shard of Forever. The Keeper awaited him, its dark form towering over him. "You cannot outrun what you have become," it said. "You are a splinter of time, Elias Marlowe, a ghost in the tapestry." Elias fell to his knees, broken and exhausted. "Please," he begged, "let me fix it. Let me go back." The Keeper leaned closer, its voice a cold whisper. "There is no going back. But there is one last truth you must see." The void shifted again. Elias saw the moment he first activated the chronosphere. But he wasn't alone. In the shadows, he saw himself, or rather, the monstrous version of himself, watching with hollow eyes. As his past self activated the machine, the creature reached out, its hand passing through the chronosphere. The moment fractured, splitting into 1,000 shards of time. The Keeper spoke one final time. "You were always both the traveler and the monster. The cycle has no beginning and no end. Welcome to eternity."